The paper was no bigger than a matchbox folded twice, edges soft as if it had been handled a dozen times before it ever reached me. My grandson Hamza slid it into my palm the way children pass answers during exams, quick, nervous, eyes darting to make sure no one was watching. "Daddy," he whispered, his small fingers tightening around mine, "don't read it here, please." His voice shook, not the playful tremble of a child hiding candy, but something deeper, heavier, something that made my heart stumble in my chest. It was Eid dinner at my son's house. The living room was full of laughter, clinking teacups, the smell of biryani and kebabs drifting in from the kitchen. My daughters-in-law were arguing over who had added too much spice. My sons were discussing business, politics, cricket, everything men talk about when they want to sound important. And Hamza, my quiet, thoughtful grandson, stood beside me like a shadow, eyes too serious for an 8-year-old. I slipped the note into the pocket of my shawl and nodded. "All right, Beta, go play." He hesitated. "Promise you'll check." "I promise." Only then did he run off, joining his cousins in their noisy game, but he kept glancing back at me, as if afraid the promise might vanish into the air if he didn't keep watching it. That night, when the house finally fell silent and I was alone in the guest room, I took out the note. 2 words written in uneven pencil. Storage 247. Nothing else, no explanation, no signature. My hands began to shake. My late husband, Ahmed, had once rented a small storage unit years ago, back when he was sorting out some old business papers. After his death, I had closed most of his accounts, sold what little he had left, and tried to settle into the quiet life of a widow. The storage unit had slipped from my mind like an old dream. Why would an 8-year-old know about it? And why would he be so afraid to talk about it out loud? The next morning, I called my son, Hamza's father. "Did you ever take Hamza to your father's storage unit?" I asked casually. There was a pause. "What storage unit, Ammi?" My stomach tightened. "The one your Abba rented years ago." Another pause, longer this time. "I don't know anything about that. Why?" "No reason," I lied, "just memory playing tricks." But memory was not playing tricks. Fear was. 2 days later, I took a rickshaw across the city to the old industrial area where the storage facility was located. The buildings there were gray and tired, paint peeling, gates creaking like old bones. The office smelled of dust and stale tea. A young man behind the counter looked up when I gave him the number. "Unit 247, he repeated, typing into his computer. "Yes, it's still active, paid for in advance. Name, Ahmed Rahman." My husband's name. "But he passed away 10 years ago," I said softly. The clerk frowned. "Payments are automatic from a trust account. No one ever came to close it." A coldness spread through my chest. "May I see it?" He hesitated, then nodded. "If you can prove relation." I showed him my ID. After some paperwork, he handed me a key, old, heavy, with a faded red tag. Unit 247 was at the far end of a long, narrow corridor. The fluorescent lights flickered, humming like insects. My footsteps echoed too loudly as if the walls were listening. When I reached the door, my hands were trembling so badly I had to steady them against the cold metal. What was I expecting? Old furniture, boxes of documents, maybe my husband's clothes, things he couldn't bear to throw away. What I was not expecting was the smell. As the door rolled up with a metallic groan, a wave of old paper, wood, and something else, something sharp and chemical, washed over me. The unit was packed floor to ceiling with neatly stacked boxes, wooden crates, metal trunks, everything labeled in my husband's careful handwriting. But it was the large canvas-covered shape in the center that made my breath catch. It was about the size of a small cupboard, tall, rectangular. And it had a tag tied to it. "Property of AR, do not open without family present." My knees weakened. I stepped inside, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure someone in the office could hear it. I began opening the smaller boxes first, needing time, courage, something to prepare me for whatever that central object held. The first box contained photographs, hundreds of them, black and white, some in color. Faces I recognized, my husband as a young man, my children as Bobbies our wedding day, but also faces I did not know. Men in uniforms, women in formal dresses, a large house I had never seen. The second box held letters, tied with ribbon, some in Urdu, some in English, many addressed to my husband from a law firm, others from a woman whose name made my heart stutter. Sarah Rahman. I had never known anyone by that name. I opened one letter, my fingers numb. Ahmed, it began, he's growing fast. He has your eyes. I wish you could see him more often, but I understand the risks. Hey. Your eyes. My vision blurred. My husband had never mentioned another child, never hinted at another family. We had been married for 42 years. We had built our lives together, struggled together, buried our parents together. Had he lived a second life in the shadows? And then, as if the universe wanted to make the truth impossible to ignore, I opened the third box. Inside were toys. Old ones carefully wrapped, a small cricket bat, a toy train, a stuffed lion with one eye missing. On the bat, written in faded marker, was a name. Hamza. My heart stopped. My grandson's name. But these toys were far older than him, at least 20 years old. I sank onto one of the crates, the air knocked out of my lungs. The room seemed to tilt. 2 Hamzas. 2 boys. 2 bloodlines. The realization crept over me like a slow, inevitable tide. My husband had another son, and that son had named his child Hamza. Which meant my grandson had a cousin he didn't know about. Or worse, a brother. My hands flew to my mouth. No, that was impossible. My son was my son. I had carried him for 9 months. I had felt every kick, every pain. He was mine. But the letters spoke of risks, of secrecy, of arrangements. And then there was the largest trunk at the back, locked with a small brass padlock. The same kind of lock my husband used on his personal diary. My fingers, moving as if guided by something other than my will, reached for the key. It fit. Inside were files, legal documents, birth certificates, trust papers. In one photograph, placed carefully on top, a young boy about 6 or 7 standing beside my husband. The boy was smiling, missing 2 front teeth. My husband's arm was around his shoulders, protective, proud. The resemblance was unmistakable. Those were my husband's eyes. Those were my husband's dimples. And on the back of the photograph, in my husband's handwriting, for Hamza the first. I gasped, a sharp, broken sound that echoed off the metal walls. My husband had had a son before our marriage. A son he had hidden. A son whose existence he had buried so deeply that even his own family did not know. And yet somehow my grandson did. My mind raced back to the note, to the fear in Hamza's eyes. How had he discovered this, and why now? The answer came to me like a punch to the chest. 3 months ago, my son had started talking about selling some old properties and closing unnecessary accounts. He had mentioned finding an old file with his father's name on it. He had said, half-jokingly, that Abba always had secrets. Had he found the storage unit? Had Hamza seen something he was not supposed to see? Suddenly, the silence of the corridor felt heavy, dangerous. I packed the most important documents into my bag, the photograph, a few letters, the trust papers, and locked everything back. That evening I went straight to my son's house. Hamza was in his room drawing. When he saw me, his face lit up with relief and then clouded with fear. "Daddy," he whispered, "did you go?" I closed the door and sat beside him. "Yes, Beta," I went. He swallowed. "Did you see the pictures?" I nodded. He stared at his hands. Abu was very angry. He said, "Those things are not for children," he said. "I must forget." "What things, Hamza?" He hesitated, then blurted out, "The other boy, the one who looks like Abu." But is Abu, it's confusing." My heart clenched. He said Dada had another family and that it could cause problems. He said if people find out, there will be fights about money, about name, about everything. Tears welled in his eyes. "But Daddy, that boy, he looked lonely in the pictures and he had my name." I pulled him into my arms. "Beta," I said softly, "you did the right thing by telling me." "But Abu said." "I know what your Abu said," I interrupted gently. "Sometimes adults are afraid of the truth because it changes things, but the truth does not disappear just because we close our eyes." That night I confronted my son. He didn't deny it, he couldn't. The documents, the photograph, the trust account, all of it lay between us on the table like a third, silent presence. He was born before you married Amy, my son said finally. Abba had an affair. The woman died young. He took responsibility, but he never brought the boy into our lives. He sent money. He set up the trust. He made arrangements for education, but he kept him separate. Why? I asked, my voice hollow. Because he was afraid, my son replied, of scandal, of hurting you, of breaking the family. And now the boy is a man, he has a son, he named him Hamza after his father, after our father. The room was thick with unshed words. And you want to pretend they don't exist, I said. My son looked away. I want to protect what we have. I thought of the little boy in the photograph, of the lonely smile, of the trust my husband had placed in sealed boxes and silent payments. And of my grandson, brave enough to slip me a note. No, I said firmly, you want to protect what you think you own, but family is not property, it is responsibility. He was silent. I am going to meet them, I continued. Your brother, your nephew, they are bloods, they have a right to know where they come from. What if they want to share? He asked quietly. Then we will give them what is fair, I replied, not because the law forces us, but because our conscience should. Weeks later, I stood in a small cafe across town, my hands wrapped around a cup of untouched tea, waiting. The door opened and a man walked in. He was in his early 30s, tall, dark-haired, nervous. When our eyes met, something ancient and familiar stirred in my chest. He smiled uncertain. Amy. The word broke something open inside me. Behind him, a little boy peeked out, clutching his hand. Daddy, the boy asked softly. I gasped. Not in shock this time. In wonder. Because sometimes a single whispered note can uncover not just secrets, but lost hearts waiting to be found.